Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I think we're live. Am I live? Shoot me a comment if you're watching live on LinkedIn. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, hello. But you're missing out if you're not tuning in live on LinkedIn. If you're tuning in live on LinkedIn, please drop a hello, a thumbs up in the chat. I just want to make sure everybody can see me, everybody can hear me, everybody is as riled up as I am for this episode. Because it's going to be a big episode today. Today, first and foremost, especially if you're watching after the fact, it is July the 5th, 2024. How's your day going? It's a Friday. Getting into the afternoon if you're on Eastern time or something similar. And it's going to be a big episode for a few reasons. Number one, we have a lot of immigration stuff to catch up on. As many of you know, I go live every 2 weeks. I talk about recent Canadian immigration news, updates, stories, my opinions, my thoughts, my hot takes, all that good stuff. And I have not gone live in about a month, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Dan says, yes, we can see you. Awesome. Hey, Dan, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in live. Appreciate it. And I was away for 2 weeks. I was actually on a trip with my wife in Japan, and so that threw off my Visto show cadence. But now we are back in action. So I'm staying put for quite some time. So I will be back to my every 2 weeks cadence. But what that means is I have a lot of Canadian immigration news to catch up on, some of which you may have already heard, but some of which will be a good review, and or I will make sure to give my opinions, my thoughts. Is this good? Is this bad? So it's not just going through the news, but also sharing some opinions and, of course, getting yours as well. We have Kay says hello from Alberta. Hey Kay, thanks for tuning in. Hope you're doing well, man. Hope things are going well. We have some interesting stuff to discuss. And then the other reason why this is going to be an exciting episode is because at the end, and if you already saw this on my LinkedIn post, then this isn't such a surprise to you. But what we're going to be doing at the end of this episode is actually testing our AI Copilot. Maybe testing's the wrong word. I'm going to be using our AI Copilot because this is live. We have dozens of law firms already using this already across the country. But I'm going to be using it to answer your questions and hopefully give you some immigration advice. Isn't such a surprise. So if you do have any immigration questions, anything like that, then please feel free to throw them in the chat. Madur is here, says, yes, you're live. Thanks for confirming, Madur. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're doing well. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into some Canadian immigration news, updates, all that fun stuff. We'll talk for about 15, 20 minutes. And then at the end, I'm going to go through any Canadian immigration questions that you may have. I also have a couple that have been pre-submitted through our Google form that I sent out this morning and on through our email list and on LinkedIn. So I do have a couple questions there. But if you are tuning in live, and you have any Canadian immigration questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and I will be putting them into our AI at the end of the show, and we'll be looking up what the answers are, seeing if they're good, making sure they're good, and going from there. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in, and if you can see on the agenda, topic number one of my favorite topics. We're talking about express entry draws, folks. Just taking my quick patented sip of water for the segue. The segue sip, some might call it. Okay, so let's dive in. Express entry, been an interesting month or so, right? Again, I've been away, so pardon my awayness. But hopefully you can see on screen here, I'm going to post this link in the chat. If you want to follow along, this is a link to the Canadian government website. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, you will find all of these links in the description below. But anyways, let's take a look at express entry. And I'm going to share my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours as well. But basically, today's the 5th, July 5th. Yesterday, we saw a trade occupations draw. Now, I want to make a quick note here. This was the first trade draw of 2024. This was surprising to me, because from everything I see and hear and read in the news, we need a lot more tradespeople, right? We have to build more homes. We need more plumbers. We need more, electricians, all that kind of stuff. And yet they haven't used the trades draw at all this year until yesterday, right? So you can see they did one yesterday on July 4th, and the last one they did was December of 2023. So I don't know. Is IRCC just I mean, look in the last month, they just haven't done occupation draws to begin with since they did the French one in April. And what they've done through all of May and June, as you'll see here, so May 30th, they did a 2,900 person PNP draw. May 31st, they did a 3,000 person CEC draw. So pretty big batch here, right? They invited about 6,000 people at the end of May. And then in June, they did a small PNP draw, 1,500 people. And then at the beginning of July, they did another PNP draw, 920 people, and then they just invited 1,800 people. But by all means, like, this combo of draws is quite small, right? They invited about 2,700 people. This is relatively small for a batch of IRCC draws. So I have a few thoughts. Number one, it does, and again, if you guys have any thoughts, opinions, questions about Express Entry, by all means, feel free to throw them in the chat. I know Madhur has some, passionate thoughts if you follow him on LinkedIn, which I highly recommend. He's got some passionate thoughts, which he shares very well. But anyways, number one, there's been a clear shift, right? Like if we look at before May 30th, IRCC was doing a lot of general and occupation-specific draws. Look at this. If we go back months and months and months to the beginning of the year, it was basically only general draws and then the occupation-specific draws. What's happened since the end of May is IRCC seems to be shifting into more inside of Canada focus, right? And I say that because CEC, you need 1+ years of Canadian work experience, and PNP tends to, not for everybody, but tends to prioritize people that are inside Canada. Because in order to be nominated for a PNP, you typically, not always, but in a lot of cases, you need, a Canadian diploma, or you need Canadian work experience, or you need a Canadian job offer, right? Or something like that. So, and I think this makes some sense, but basically, Canada focusing more on inviting people from or favoring people inside or who can get jobs inside Canada. My big guess is because we have a huge bubble of temporary residents in Canada, way too many for them to fit into the PR quota over the next few years. So IRCC is prioritizing them, right? Which makes sense. They did the first trade draw of the year. I don't know why. I'm shocked it took this long because of the need for tradespeople. But so yeah, I don't know why they did it at this point. I don't have anything against it. I was just more surprised that it took so long for them to do it. So anyways, all in all, I will say the major theme that I've noticed with Express Entry is we have no idea what to do or what to expect. And I've said this in many, many Visto shows before, how far a little bit of transparency would go from Immigration Canada. There are quite literally, I don't like using that word, I think it's so overused, but anyways, there are quite literally, I think the number's in and around 2 million, there's actually more, I think, there's like 2-point-something million temporary residents in Canada who will probably have their permits expiring. Obviously, some might have them expiring tomorrow, but some might have them expiring within the next couple of years. But if you have multiple millions of TRs with expiring permits, what you need to realize is that the PR target is 500,000 people, right? So this is why I've been a little bit doom and gloom on LinkedIn lately, but here's why. Let's just say super conservatively, 2.5 million TRs, right? Temporary residents. And the PR cap, I think for next year, I forget if this year or next year it's 500,000. I think this year it's like 485 or something, but whatever, right? 500K PR target per year, right? They sometimes go over the target, they sometimes go under, right? But if 2.5 roughly, now this is current TRs, right? So this also doesn't count the number of TRs, coming in next year, right? Hundreds of thousands more, and the year after, right? But the problem is, this year, only roughly 500K of them at most, right? Because sometimes people get PR from outside Canada, they're not even temporary residents. At most, in 1 year, 500,000 of these are going to get PR, right? So this number, this yearly number, is not necessarily going to go down because only 500,000 of them at most will get PR next year. And that doesn't count that there will be a new batch of new TRs coming to Canada the year after. So I think it's going to be a bit of a mess. I do think it's a good sign that IRCC is doing some more PNP and CEC draws, because I think those people need to be prioritized. Otherwise, it's going to be an even bigger disaster than I already think that it'll be. But anyways, as they say, time will tell. So anyways, if you have any thoughts on Express Entry, please let me know. On the draws, are you surprised? Are you not surprised? Is it a good decision? Is it a bad decision? Ram, I do see your question. And should I save it? Anyways, I might. Do you want me to ask that question to the AI, or is that for? Let's read the question. International students with expiring PGWPs are vainly attempting to extend their finite PGW using fake PGWP extensions. Okay, so I'll say okay, Ram. So you did put question for AI. With tough could indeed determine. Could you share any statistics on the frequency of IRCC issuing 30-day? Well, the problem is, Ram, I'll answer that question now quickly. We've trained our AI on the rules and regulations and laws. So, for example, I'll throw it into AI at the end, Ram, because I'm curious to see how it responds. But like, if you ask it about what people might do in the future, it's not very good at that. You know what I mean? Could you share any statistics on the frequency of IRCC issuing 30-day voluntary to former international students? We haven't fed it all of those IRCC data, but Ram, if you hold on to it, I will throw it into the AI at the end anyways, because I'm curious to see. I have heard a lot of what you're saying, which is now so many of these people are struggling that they're kind of willing to do whatever the heck they can to stay inside the country, including, as you're alluding to, fake PGWP extensions, which is a terrible idea. But anyways, thank you for that, and I'm going to save it, Ram, and we will ask the AI at the end to see what it thinks. Earl Blaney is in the house. Earl, how are you doing? Thanks for tuning in live. Here are the numbers of expiring PGWP and C41 spouse of skilled work permits, 2024 to 2025. I don't, Earl, unless there's an issue on my end, I'm not seeing. Oh, you just shared a link. Sorry, I was. Earl Blaney is in the. I didn't see the second link. Let's pull it up here quickly, because if it's a source for Mr. Blaney, I'm always interested. Ram says, appreciate your honest and candid response. Josh will hang around. Awesome, thanks, Ram. And if you do have any other questions, feel free. Okay, so this is an Earl Blaney, but the volume of PGWP extensions has contributed significantly to the rise in NPR numbers, non-permanent resident numbers. The last chart shows the number of PGWP holders and C41 work permits set to expire. The red line shows the average number of expiries per month, 18,500 per month. Oh my God, the last chart. Okay, here we go. So basically what we're looking at is, on average, Jesus. So hold on, let me pull up the old calculator here. 18,000, I'm going to pull this up on screen. 18,000, let's just do 500 for round numbers per month. Let's multiply. Now keep in mind, this is just PGWP holders and their spouses times 12. So this is 222,000 per year, right? So this is why I had that big concern, because every year the PR target is, they're holding it now at about 500K, right? And what Earl is telling us is, in an average year, what was it? 220,000 PGWP plus spouses expiring. So let's say every single one of these people managed to get PR. That's almost 50% of the target right there. But keep in mind, this target, and I'm not going to go into detail because it would take me too long, but this 500K is actually divided up even further, right? So what I'm not even attributing to here is, like, there's only a certain amount of that 500 that are designated for what they call economic immigration, right? So like EE, SUV, you know what I mean? Like, et cetera, stuff like that. There's a huge, a lot for family class, refugee, right? Blah, 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 right? So, I believe economic is like, I don't know, less than 200,000. So what happened? I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's less than 200,000. I could pull it up, but we have a lot to cover today. So this 220,000 might even be bigger than the yearly quota for economic immigrants. Which, what does that mean? That means every month, thousands of people are going to have their permits expiring with nothing to do. So anyways, not great news. Sorry to start this as such a negative Nancy, but this is a problem that Earl has rightfully been kind of pointing out for years, right? He's been talking about the imbalance between way too many students coming in, the mishandling there, blah, blah, blah. Definitely follow Earl as well as Madur if you're not already on LinkedIn. But yeah, this is going, it already kind of is. We're seeing the protests, right? I mean, maybe you're following the news. We're seeing the protests in PEI, in Ontario. I think in Alberta there were protests, right? This is already a bit of a problem. It's only going to get worse because every single month another 18,500 roughly on average people are losing their status or their PGWPs are expiring. Anyways, another patented segue sip, and let's keep moving on here. Month, I do see another. We have a few more questions. I've said this so many times. The LinkedIn Live page just doesn't work well for me. So I have to refresh a second window to see all the new comments that come in. So I apologize if I'm not like super on the ball here. Amanjit says, "Hi Joss, let's try asking AI this. Is someone with DUI charged from 20 years back in the United States inadmissible?" That's a great question, Amanjit, and I'm going to save it for the AI at the end. That's a great example of a question because it's not opinionated, right? It's kind of like fact-based. What are the rules, right? So questions like that are very good for the AI. Dan says, "We see a lot of students enrolled in courses that have little potential for employment in Canada. Should we consider all of them for PR? Is this a trick to bypass the proper point system?" So Dan, that question pretty much encapsulates one of my favorite words, why we're in such a bad place to begin with. Because this is a big problem, and I'm going to try to summarize it really quick because again, I have a lot to get through here. What happened over the last 8 to 10 years is the number of international students exploded to the point where we have all these private colleges and strip malls and blah, 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 because IRCC put no cap on students and the colleges just started taking everybody because why not? They can charge international tuition and basically are printing money, especially those private colleges with mostly online courses, business admin degree and blah, blah, blah degree that don't provide any value. They don't match up with the labor. There was zero oversight, which is why the industry exploded. And now we find ourselves in the current day problem, which is we have way too many temporary residents with not very good degrees who are struggling to get PR. So that's a great question that goes hand in hand and pretty much is the cause of what I just showed you numerically. And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And by interesting, I mean sad, because it's probably not going to be pretty. Anyways, I'm going to move along really quick because I want to get to our AI tool as well, and we'll go into that. So next up, what I wanted to talk about, pardon my lovely drawing, 2 news items. So number 1, Canada improves fairness for applicants by ending post-graduation work permit flagpoling. Now, what does this mean? I'll cover it pretty quickly because, like I said, it did come out, you'll see here, about June 21st, not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. But basically, for those who don't know, and I'm putting the link in the chat if you want to follow along. For those who don't know, what flagpoling means is basically, let's say you're inside Canada and you have you want to apply for a post-graduation work permit, right? Let's use this as an example because this is exactly what it applies to. Instead of submitting your application online and waiting weeks, probably months, right, to get a decision, what was recently allowed is you could jump in your car, drive across the border into the US, and then turn right around, So that's why they call it flagpole, because you're like driving around the flagpole. You know what I mean? You turn around, and when you come back to enter into Canada, quote unquote, you could apply for the permit at the port of entry. So like with CBSA, well, not with CBSA, at customs, right? When you're trying to clear customs into Canada. Now, as you can imagine, the problem with that is as the number of international students and PGWP applicants started to grow, and as the delay in processing times starting to get bigger and bigger, more and more people started to rely on flagpoling. The problem with that is it holds up the borders, right? And I'm not blaming people who are trying to flagpole, because they had pretty good reason to. But what happens is, as you know, some border crossings are busy enough as it is, right? With just regular people trying to enter for whatever reason. If you pile on top of that a whole bunch of people that are effectively applying for their Canadian immigration, permits like PGWPs, it just takes way more resources and time at the border, slows everything down even more, etc., right? So anyways, what happened here is IRCC said not anymore, and they've basically removed the ability to flagpole for a post-graduation work permit. So is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, if you're somebody who crosses the border a lot, it's a good thing, because things probably will be a little bit faster now. You know what I mean? But if you're an international student, it's probably not great, because, well, I don't know how long PGWP processing times are right now. I'm guessing they're not short, because nothing in Canada is right now. But anyways, I don't know. Anybody have any opinions on this? Is it good? Is it bad? I don't really know. PGWPs are like pretty standard run-of-the-mill applications, so like nothing too fancy or not too much to worry about. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a loss of a good tool, shall we say, to some applicants. Manel is in the house. Manel says, at Dan Klein, the majority of students want to settle in Canada, but some are here only after an education and have no plans to settle here. Yeah, so I mean, that's the case too. But some are, yeah, I would say definitely the minority just want to study and leave, right? Most of them definitely want to stay. So it's a big problem now that there are so many that have come in and want to stay, but the programs don't align with the needs of the country. And by the way, our unemployment rates continue to not be great, right? So it's not a good combination. But anyways, Manel, thank you for the comment and adding a little bit more there. The other thing I want to quickly mention is the new pilot programs to support caregivers and Canadian families. IRCC intends to make the caregivers program permanent. Again, I will put a link to this in the comments if you're following with me live. And if you're watching after the fact on YouTube, you will find a link in the descriptione as well. Madur says 3 to 6 months for PGWPs. But from what I understand, from what I remember from the PGWP, as long as you're eligible and apply at the right time, you can still start working. So not the end of the world, I don't think, there. If I remember correctly, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that you can start work if as long as you followed the rules, applied at the right time, you actually graduated. I think you can start work right away. But anyways, so let's quickly talk about caregivers. I don't know too much about the program. I never did too much of this work, but IRC. So this was June 3rd. Caregivers, blah, 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 blah. So there were pilots for the caregiver programs, and IRCC today announced new enhanced caregiver pilots. This will allow caregivers to continue to come to Canada as we work toward making the caregiver pilot programs permanent. So it does seem like they're going to work their way towards permanency there. I have mixed feelings about this because what I've heard, so look at this, through these new programs, candidates interested in working in Canada's home sector will be eligible to apply if they meet the following. Now keep in mind, the new pilot programs will provide home care workers with permanent residence on arrival in Canada. They need a CLB4, which is very low for those who don't know, hold the equivalent of a Canadian high school diploma, have recent and relevant work experience, and receive an offer for a full-time home care job. I just hope here that they flesh this out a little bit, have recent and relevant work experience. Because and I hate to say this, but the first place my mind goes to as a Canadian immigration lawyer who's been following the industry for over 8 years now is when IRCC launches something, there are going to be a lot of people around the world looking to take advantage of it. And we've seen it with everything. The study permit, asylum claims, anything, right? So my problem is, especially because this allows you to go right to PR, are there people around the world right now starting to peddle this program, right? Shady dealers saying, hey, do you want PR in Canada? Oh, you've been working for 7 years as a, finance manager? Okay, we're going to rub out the last 2 years and we're going to change your work experience to a caregiver. And go write IELTS. Okay, we'll get you a 4 because anybody who speaks English semi-reasonably could probably get a 4. And, most of if you're half decent work experience, then you probably have at least a high school equivalent. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people. And okay, pay us $50K and we're going to hook you up with an employer in Canada that's going to give you a full-time job. You know what I mean? I don't have to go into too many more details. My concern here is the fraud and the scamming that will probably inevitably happen anyways. But if you make it a little bit too easy, then you're just asking for it. You know what I mean? So anyways, I hope that they flesh out the work experience and provide a little bit more detail, a little bit more guidance, and actually, just run it properly, because I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about how this might be taken advantage of, especially with so many people struggling to get PR. Arshdeep is in the house. Hey, Arshdeep. Most students don't even worry about PR pathway until it's too late. They only start thinking about it when 6 to 8 months are left on their work permit. I hope this current situation is an eye-opener for the upcoming students. That's a great point. And I would say it's already happening, Arshdeep, right? We're seeing the number of international student applicants plummet into Canada, right? And you're exactly right. I think what has happened, and this goes back to my earlier point of the floodgates were just left open in Canada for years, was nobody really had to, right? Like Arshdeep, you know this because you're an experienced, you're a smart consultant. Over the years, like if you wind the clocks back to like 2019, you didn't have to worry about PR if you were coming to Canada as an international student, because you just graduate, get 1 year of Canadian work experience, and you're a shoo-in for express entry, right? Because you have the bonus points from the Canadian degree, you have the bonus points from the Canadian work experience, no problem. This has become a huge problem over the last few years as PR has gotten way more competitive and way more difficult. So now you can't just dilly-dally your way into Canada with a random program at a random school and think that you're a shoo-in for PR, because it just hasn't been happening. And people are waking up. Students can work while studying 20 hours a week. We should give priority to these ones. Well, Dan, most of them can, right? So that's another problem, right? Is like, assuming you meet the requirements, there's nothing distinguishing like a student who's working 20 hours a week as a X from a 20 hours a week at Y, right? It's all considered just like part-time work while you're studying, and they don't even count that as express entry work experience either. Is there an advisory made of industry experts that helps governments to release all these rules, or do like Microsoft and use as beta testers? I don't know, Dan. It's a great question. IRCC says they go out and they talk to the public and they have support groups and blah, 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 but I don't know. Who knows, right? Who knows if they are even doing all that stuff and or if they listen to us, right? I would say on average, because with Visto, I work with immigration consultants and lawyers all day, every day, right? And what I would say is, on average, most Canadian immigration professionals don't feel like they've been heard much, and they don't see that much sense coming into the system. So maybe that's an answer to your question for what it's worth. Okay, so that's the news if you want to take a look at it. What I want to do now is just a quick few shout outs related to Visto before we open up the AI here. Number one, the podcast, the Canadian Immigration Pros podcast, if you haven't checked it out already. In fact, we have a few guests from the podcast live right now with us on LinkedIn. So if you want to hear, and I'll pull up some episodes so we can see them on screen. If you go to this link, you can see the Canadian Immigration Pros podcast. I link to everywhere you can go to listen to it if you prefer the listening as a podcast, or you can go on our YouTube channel and watch the videos there. There's some really good videos on a wide range of topics. I have a few more episodes coming down the pipeline as well. So you can see we talk about everything, right? Temporary workers, judicial reviews, international student space, blah, blah, blah. And a couple of our guests, you can see I do have an episode with Earl Blaney, who was in the comments earlier. And I also had an episode with Madur, who was in the comments earlier as well. I don't remember where it was, but Madur, you're on here somewhere. Oh, here he is, Madur. And those were both really good episodes, partially because Madur and Earl are very smart and very opinionated. And opinionated people make great guests on podcasts. So anyways, check that out if you haven't already. And I think you'll enjoy it, and expect some new episodes over the next few weeks as well. Lastly, just a quick Visto update. As many of you know, we are an immigration tech platform. So we have a platform that we sell to Canadian immigration law firms. So if you are an immigration consultant, lawyer, you're looking to streamline your operations, that's all we do at Visto, right? One-click form filling, one-click merge, compress, and rename for PDFs, management, communication with your clients, all that fun stuff. And what I'm going to segue that into is one of the other things in our platform. So this is the Visto platform right here, right? We have all these features, all this stuff that you can do, preparing applications, managing them, blah, blah, blah. But one of the biggest newer features that we've been focused on more is our AI Copilot. And basically what this is a custom-built Canadian immigration expert, right? So we've been training this basically chatbot on Canadian government information, so that you can ask it questions and it spits out, responses and sources to the Canadian government websites that it's relying on for different questions, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into some of your questions, and we're going to see what the AI says. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize, as I promised, I'm going to prioritize the questions that have been asked by live attendees. So if you are still here live on LinkedIn and you have Canadian immigration questions about rules, regulations, stuff like that, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and we will see what the AI says. Now I'm going to go all the way to the top here. We're going to start with Ram's question, and I'm going to rejig it a little bit, Ram, because one thing I've learned with AI, and maybe you guys can relate to this, is the output from AI is typically, I'll say it this way. The better your input, the better the output, right? Because the AI is not like a magician yet. They're quite powerful. They're quite smart. But the better your question or prompt is, the better the response will be. Having more stringent checks, let's see here, could indeed deter many from attempting to game the system using could you share any statistics on the frequency of IRCC issuing 30 days? Okay, I'm just going to hit enter, Ram, and we're going to see what the heck happens here. Yeah, I do not have access. Yeah, so we don't have, so that's the other thing, Ram, that we built specifically into our bot, which is we've trained it only on Canadian government information. And so if it doesn't have information specifically about that, we haven't yet fed it the up-to-date statistics. We will at some point, but we haven't yet. So if it doesn't have that answer, it will actually tell you, I do not have access to that stuff, right? So unfortunately, we couldn't answer the question. I had a feeling it wouldn't, but let's keep moving on. Or if you have any other questions, then I will be happy to give it a try. Amanjeet asks, is someone with a DUI charge from 20 years back in the United States inadmissible to Canada? Let's see what our Copilot says. Amanjeet, thank you very much for the question. And it's thinking, yes, an individual with a DUI charge from 20 years ago may be considered inadmissible under Canadian immigration law. Foreign nationals who have committed or been convicted of a crime outside of Canada that would be considered a crime under Canadian law may be deemed inadmissible for criminality. A DUI is considered a serious crime, particularly if it equates to an indictable offense. However, there are remedies available for overcoming this inadmissibility. Since more than 10 years have passed, the individual may be deemed rehabilitated by the passage of time. Deemed rehabilitation depends on the nature of the offense and whether the individual has committed more than one offense. In the case of a single DIY, if no other offenses have been committed, the individual may be deemed rehabilitated. I didn't know that because I didn't do much like rehab work when I was practicing. The individual may apply for individual rehabilitation if at least 5 years have passed, which it has. Since the completion of the sentence. So I don't know if the person had to serve time, which includes any probation. The person would no longer be if an individual has not yet deemed rehabilitated and has not applied for or received individual rehabilitation, they may still be able to enter Canada by applying for a TRP if they have a valid reason. So anyways, hopefully that is helpful, Amanjeet. And you'll see the other thing that our Copilot does is it provides sources. So you can actually click the link and it'll take you to the Canadian government website that it's pulling some of this information from. So you can double check, right? We always want to double check that the AI is accurate and up to date. You can do extra, updates, whatever, do some extra digging and just make sure that, the answer would suffice. So let me know what you think. Was that helpful? Was it good? Was it bad? And we will move on. Thank you again, Amanjeet, for that question. Let me move down the list here. I think we had one or two more, right? Hope this guy. We should. Is there a great point. What announcements are okay? So Kay is in the house. Kay, what announcements are expected in terms of international student cap and revisions of PGWP until October? I don't know, Kay. I've been a little bit away and not as specifically keeping up to date. But they've already set the cap, right, for the next now year and a half, right? Because they set the cap at the end of last year, and so I don't know. And there was a recent announcement as well too about PGWPs and who would be eligible for them, right? I think like it's got to be like masters and those types of degree holders, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know what else is coming through the pipeline, okay? But I will certainly keep an eye out. And usually with big announcements, I post about them on LinkedIn. So you and I are already connected, but let's just make sure keep an eye on anything major I usually post on. Arshdeep says, I think the answer was well-rounded for the criminality question. Awesome. Glad to hear it. I have a very specific question for AI regarding the eligibility for endorsement under the Atlantic Immigration Program. If someone graduated from an institute in Nova Scotia but found an AIP, is he eligible to apply for endorsement right away? Or need to complete 12 months of client because he moved from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick? Okay. Arshdeep. Let's see. I definitely know that we have some AIP information on the back end, so I think it'll have an answer. And we got some stuff coming up here. I do have to say I have to jump in about 5 to 10 minutes, but I do want to make sure we get through the last questions. Okay. Under the Atlantic Immigration Program, international graduates who have obtained an eligible educational credential in one of the Atlantic provinces are exempt from the work experience requirement if they meet certain conditions. Based on the information, an international graduate who has completed their studies and has obtained an eligible education credential does not need to meet the work experience requirement to be eligible for endorsement under AIP, even if they have found employment with a designated employer in New Brunswick. The key requirements for exemption from the work experience requirement are obtained at least a 2-year diploma, blah, blah, blah. They lived in one of the provinces for at least 16 months within the last 2 years. They have a valid temporary resident status, and they had the visa or permit they needed to work, study, or get training while they were in Canada. As long as the international graduate meets these conditions, they can apply for endorsement without needing to complete 12 months of qualifying work experience, regardless of the province. It is important to note that the job offer must be genuine and meet the labor needs, and the applicant must have a settlement plan that responds to their needs. Therefore, if they meet, they would be eligible. So, I don't know AIP that well, Arshdeep, but hopefully that's helpful. And again, our Copilot always provides sources. So for example, you can click in here and you can read up about AIP and make sure that what it's saying is actually correct, right? Now, in our case, because everything's been custom built and kept very specific, it usually is. But you always want to double check, right? Anything coming from AI. So I'm going to post the link in the chat, Arshdeep, if you want to double check. But hopefully that's helpful. And if this was actually a real client of yours, then hopefully it'll help you and your client as well. Thank you for that answer. It was very specific. Yes, that's the point, right, Arshdeep? I mean, broad, vague answers are not very helpful in immigration. So that's why we've built, like, this is a custom-built chatbot and algorithm specifically for Canadian immigration lawyers, consultants, practitioners, right? So hopefully very helpful. Glad to hear that you agreed. And the last question I want to quickly ask here, which I actually had submitted ahead of time, which was from, I think this was from Raman. Let me pull it up here. This is a question from Raman that I want to throw in as well. So Raman asks, I am just finishing my 2-year diploma course from a DLI related to STEM and soon going into my post-grad work permit. My question is, when should I open my Express Entry profile? Before I complete 1 year of work experience or immediately on completing 1 year experience? Thanks. So let's see what the Copilot has to say. And we just got to wait for it to type out. And then I have one more question as well I see here. Is IRCC aware of fake asylum seekers? That's because so many people have come into Canada as visitors and then they seek fake asylum, yet no one is talking about those numbers. Let me get to that in just a second. So here we go. Here's the answer for you, Raman. As an international student, you are considering your options for permanent residence. One of the main ways, blah, blah, blah. To be eligible for CEC, which is often a popular pathway, you must have at least 1 year of skilled work experience in Canada in Tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. Here are some considerations for timing. Before completing 1 year of work experience, you can create an expression profile. However, without the required Canadian work experience, you would not be eligible for CEC. Creating a profile early can be beneficial if you are eligible for another program such as FSW. So one thing to consider, Raman, is are you going to be eligible, or let me reword this. Which Express Entry programs might you be eligible for ahead of then versus not, right? So for example, are you already eligible through the Federal Skilled Worker Program? Or when you graduate, would you be eligible for the Federal Skilled Worker Program without 1 year of Canadian work experience, as an example? After completing 1 year of experience, once you've completed the 1 year in Canada, you will meet the eligibility criteria for CEC. At this point, you can update the profile. Important notes: ensure that you maintain your legal status in Canada while working and waiting to become eligible. So PGWP stuff. Keep in mind that the CRS score, such as higher education, etc., etc. In summary, while you can create a profile at any time, it is most advantageous to do so when you meet the eligibility criteria for one of the immigration programs managed by the system. So hopefully that's helpful, Raman. I will send you that answer in case you're not tuned in live, because I know you said it ahead of time. I also got a question asking about fake asylum seekers. The AI won't know that answer, and whoever submitted the question, they didn't include their name, so I don't know who asked this question. But it's absolutely been a big problem, right? This is what I was alluding to earlier here, right? Which is like there's so many people struggling to get PR that they're turning to whatever else they can. Maybe they're going to pretend to be a caregiver. Maybe they're going to pretend to be an asylum seeker, right? And then, as you say in your question, I feel the genuine international students are going to fall victim of everything and will be denied the opportunity to get PR and contribute to Canadian economy. So it's absolutely a huge problem. And but the AI won't know that answer, because all it does is basically gives you answers based on the rules and regulations and content that we've trained it on, right? So we haven't, it's not very good at like guessing into the future, if that makes sense. Josh, if the time permits, what oversight authority does IRCC have over social media influencers providing immigration advice without proper licensing, contributing to misinformation? Very interesting question, Ram. Let's see what it has to say. I don't know if it'll have anything to say, but now I'm curious to know. Dan says your demo with your Copilot AI comes to show that Thomas Friedman's conclusion is real. The future of jobs is that people using AI will move ahead on the ones not using AI. Absolutely. The answers are in a second, and the research by a person will take days. Exactly, Dan. And we're already starting to see this, right? Like law firms that aren't using tools like, I'm not saying you have to use Visto, but law firms that aren't using tools like Visto are just slowly starting to lose out, right, to law firms that are, because you can just work so much faster, so much more efficiently. And this goes for beyond just research, right? Like this is one element of being an immigration professional. IRCC has a mandate to oversee immigration services and ensure compliance with IRPA. Only authorized reps, such as lawyers and consultants who are members in good standing, are permitted to charge a fee to provide immigration advice. Social media influencers who provide immigration advice without proper licensing may be engaging in authorized representation, which is a violation of the IRP. Oh God, I gotta leave in 2 minutes. Violation of the IRPA. However, IRCC's direct oversight of social media is limited. The enforcement of regulations against unauthorized reps typically involves investigating complaints, working with other bodies, and potentially pursuing legal action. And then there's some factors. I'm not going to read the whole thing, Ram. Maybe what I'll do is I'll send you this answer in a message, because I have to leave in about 2 minutes. To avert issues such as the LMIA job fraud crisis, work together to ensure employer compliance and the integrity of the programs. ESDC is responsible for processing LMI applications and conducting compliance. To address misinformation, IRCC can increase public awareness, collaborate with social media platforms to identify and take down content, strengthen partnerships with regulatory bodies, encourage the public to report on their authorized rep. So, I had some interesting thoughts there. Hopefully that helps, Ram. It's a huge problem, right? And we could have a whole conversation on why why it's such a bad thing that the rise of the influencers and misinformation has caused a lot of people a lot of pain. But anyways, I'm going to have to cut it off there because I do have to head out. I hope you all found this helpful. This was certainly a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody who has submitted questions, who has shared their comments, their thoughts on the live today. If you tuned in live on LinkedIn, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, make sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and make sure to tune in next time live on LinkedIn, right? I'll put my LinkedIn profile in the description below. As you can see, a lot more fun and some added benefits when you tune in live. You can comment, you can ask questions, all that kind of stuff. So anyways, thank you again for everybody for tuning in and watching. Hopefully you found it helpful. Have a great rest of your Friday if you are watching this live. And I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.